Hi all, welcome back to part 4 of my series for newcomers and beginners of the game. In this video we're going to focus on how to record games. I briefly mentioned in the previous video about algebraic notation, and in this video I'm going to give a concrete game example, a very short game of Paul Morphy played in Paris 1858 against his opponent who was called Botin. So here, Morphy kicked off with the move e4. We're going to flip the board, so we're going to have the white pieces at the bottom, A to H at the bottom, 1 to 8 vertically, as recommended. So e4 is used to represent e2 to e4. If this was in pure coordinates, we'd have said e2-e4. Now you don't really want to have this tediousness of having to do that for every single move, when there's a shorthand which is equally effective and in a way makes the game score more interesting after, because you can know which piece or pawn was moved at that time. If this was a raw coordinate notation, you wouldn't know, if you had written e2 to e4, whether it was a pawn or piece move. So here we just write e4, there's no need for a piece prefix when it's a pawn move. So black moving e7 to e5, can you guess how you'd write that? Well, there's a slight clue here. So you'd actually write e5, so you just write the final destination, because it's assumed if you write the final destination it's a pawn move. So that's a convenient shorthand. Now we see the move c3, so this is actually c2 to c3. Now we see n f6, so n is a prefix for the piece of the knight, not to be confused with K. So K is reserved for the king and N is reserved for the knight. B for bishop, R for rook, Q for queen. So capital N for knight, F6. So that's how to represent G8 to F6. So that's much better than writing G8 to F6, because you know afterwards that's a knight moving to F6. Now one thing to bear in mind, say for example there was another knight on d7. If you imagine that there was another knight on d7, so here there's two knights that can go to f6. Let's see, so knight g f6, that's actually preferred rather than saying knight 8 to f6. You'd use first of all the file, so the g file, knight to f6. So if it was the knight on d7 to f6, it would be knight d f6. So that's how you would disambiguate when there's two choices of knight or piece that are going to the same square, which are of the same piece type. So let's go back now to the game. In the game we just wrote knight n f6 for knight to f6. Now white played d4. And now we see a capture move. N takes e4. We know it's a capture because it's got a small x. So capital N for knight takes on e4. So it's taking something on e4. One of the slight weaknesses of algebraic notation is that we don't actually know what was taken on e4. That's actually shown in one of the older notations called the descriptive notation. You would know what was captured. But for the sake of conciseness, that's actually left out now. So you just do n takes e4, not recording what was captured on e4. Now we see d takes e5, again not recording what was taken on e5. Now we see b c5, so bishop, b is the prefix for bishop to c5. Now the queen to g4, so q g4. Now we see another capture move. And it is interesting, let's get into the game logic here as well as the recording logic. Morphy is attacking the knight on e4 and the pawn on g7. Black is in quite a dangerous position here, and his best bet was actually to take on f2 with the bishop. But in the game, he played a bit of a blunder now. He played knight takes f2, and this gave white the opportunity for a very big advantage and a very short, decisive game. So n takes f2 is the knight taking on f2, and now we see queen takes g7, so q for queen takes g7, rook f8, and now we see bishop g5, and now the pawn move, because there's no piece prefix f6, and now we see another capture move. E takes f6. Because there's no piece prefix, it's a pawn taking on f6, but we just see the file, so E indicating the E file. So E takes f6. You don't need to write E5 takes f6, because that's the only thing that can take on f6 in this position, which is a pawn. So E takes f6, and now we see rook takes f6, and now Morphy took with his bishop, so B takes f6, and his opponent played bishop e7. His opponent is in a lost position now, and this is proven by Morphy's next move, which is a decisive check. So queen g8 check. Now for checks, notice that we put a plus sign to indicate it's a check. So look at that plus sign, queen g8 check. And here black just resigns. Now if your opponent resigns, actually you put resigns or 1-0, indicating that the winner is white, so 1-0. And if it was an official tournament game under FIDE time controls, you would actually ask your opponent to sign your score sheet. You'd both sign each other's score sheets and hand it in to the tournament controller. Now if it's a friendly game, you might not think, why should I bother recording these games? But even in friendly games, it's important, to get into this habit, because then you can review your games after, find your mistakes, find potential improvements for the next time you play, either your opponent or a different opponent. It's this diagnosis of where you went wrong which can accelerate your chess improvement. And also, there's a whole wealth of games available online in databases or in books and magazines that all use this algebraic notation. So start to get into the habit of reading other games as well as recording your own games. So this was a very short Morphy game. Let's have a look at this game again. So e4, e5, c3, knight f6. No, I'm saying the piece prefix, but it's abbreviated by a single letter. In different languages, by the way, these would be different letters. So, for example, in Germany, instead of recording Q, they might record D for Dame. So the actual piece prefix is just English algebraic notation in particular. So we're using the English piece prefixes. After D4, N takes E4, knight takes E4, D takes E5, bishop C5, queen G4. So you see, I'm reading this game now more naturally with the piece that was used. Knight takes F2, queen takes G7, so attacking that rook on H8. So Morphy's opponent played now rook F8, but now this allows Morphy to play the embarrassing move bishop G5. And so with bishop G5, Morphy was attacking the opponent's queen, and there's only a couple of major alternatives now, bishop E7 or F6. So let's see actually what would happen if Morphy's opponent had played bishop E7 for the purpose of curiosity. Morphy could have just played bishop takes E7, and after queen takes, just simply gobble up, maybe, that knight on F2, just king takes F2. Because it's a harmless position, this check is harmless. Because, say, king E1, and Morphy would have been a piece up. So in the game, the opponents actually, after this bishop G5, played F6. But this was still hopeless, because after E takes F6, there's a very dangerous threat now of winning black's queen with F7 check. So say Morphy's opponent had taken the rook, now knight takes H1, that would have been written as. There would be either F7 check, trying to win the queen, or even stronger, bishop E2. In fact, F7 might not be the greatest move, because, and this is going beyond a bit the scope of the video, rook takes F7 and white's queen would be attacked. So this wouldn't be as good actually as just bishop E2 here, threatening the lethal bishop H5. So in this position, Morphy's opponent would be in real trouble, because it's very difficult to defend against this threat of bishop H5. So this didn't occur in the game. After e takes f6, rook takes f6 was played, and Morphy was able to play bishop takes f6, and after bishop e7, queen g8 check was the final move. So that's a very neat game. I've chosen it because of its short length, just to demonstrate really recording of moves. And I hope this video can give you a bit more confidence that you can record your own games and more easily play through games in books and magazines, etc. So you can not only learn from your own mistakes, but you can learn from the mistakes of others. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave any comments on YouTube. Thanks very much.